Hey, hi, how's it going? If you've been here before and you're back for more, I appreciate you to my very core. But if you're new here, welcome. My name is Becca, and we talk about all things paranormal, unexplainable, and today we are going to be starting the highly requested true crime series. So if you saw my video last week, you'll know that we talked about the Cecil Hotel being an extremely haunted location due to its dark and disturbing history, and I just briefly touched on the Elisa Lam case. Now, the Elisa Lam case went viral in 2013 for the disturbing CCTV footage that the LAPD released to the public in hopes that someone would recognize her during her disappearance. But a lot of you really wanted me to go more in depth into that case, so that is the case we're going to be discussing today. Before we dive right into the Elisa Lam case, I do want to put out a little bit of a warning. The case that we're going to discuss today does talk about potential suicidal ideations and death and dying. So if that does not interest you, I bid you adieu and wish you a very well day. But if that is something that intrigues you just as much as it intrigues me, sit back, get comfy. This video is going to be lengthy, so if you're not a fan of the 4, 5, 6 parts here on TikTok, you can always go follow me on YouTube. The link is in the bio, where you can watch this video in one fluid motion. With all that being said, without further ado, ba-doop boop boo, here is today's story. Elisa Lam, also known by her Cantonese name Lam Ho Yi, was born on April 30th, 1991. Herself, her sister Sarah, who she was quite close with, and her parents, David and Yina, all lived in Vancouver, British Columbia, where they owned and operated a family restaurant named Paul's Restaurant in North Burnaby. Growing up, Elisa always expressed her desire to just travel the world and see the world for all its beauty. And she would often approach her parents and be like, hey, I really want to travel to wherever it was, and I want to do it by myself. And her parents were always not supportive of this idea. They were pretty fearful of her safety traveling the world by herself. And this really frustrated Elisa. She felt like she wasn't being heard. She felt like all of her dreams and aspirations were being kind of shadowed by her parents, and it ended up growing a huge frustration for her. So in March of 2011, Elisa created a Tumblr account. And when she created this Tumblr account, it's literally like she used this as her own personal diary, writing anything from, quote, today has been a good evening, end quote, to, quote, today was not good. I had no work and spent the day numb. You know the expression, you look like your dog just died? Well, mine did 2 days ago. It's hell. It really is. End quote. I personally felt like I was invading someone's privacy reading her posts. Like, that's how personal these posts were. But in a weird, twisted way, it kind of sets up a beautiful timeline of her life from 2011 up until February of 2013 and her disappearance. In a lot of her Tumblr posts, she was very open about her mental health and her diagnosis of depression, ADHD, and bipolar. And on May 3rd, 2012, she went into a very detailed post about her diagnoses and about her prescriptions that she was taking, and whether or not the medications that she was prescribed were actually to help treat her mental illness, or if it was just for these pharmaceutical companies to gain a profit. Although Elisa was very open and honest about her mental health, I do want to make it clear that both her parents, during the investigation of Elisa's disappearance and ultimate death, they would state that Elisa never had any suicidal ideations or never acted upon any suicidal ideations that they were aware of. In the months following her post on May 3rd about her mental health disorders, she wasn't doing good, and it's sad to now look back and read on her struggles. In the months following her May 3rd announcement to the public of her mental health ailments and her prescription medications that she was taking, the posts kind of like fluctuate from one extreme to the next. I mean, on one end, you have her saying that she's slept now for 24 plus hours and she's very clearly struggling with her mental health ailments. And then on the other side of the spectrum, her posts were, I haven't slept in over 24 hours. And it's almost like she was boasting about how well she was able to function off of no sleep. And this cycle sadly repeats itself all the way up until her disappearance and ultimate death. So in January of 2013, a month before Elisa's last post on Tumblr, she would approach her parents and just express her burning desire to see the west coast of the United States. And she would come to them and say, I'm doing really well in schooling, as Elisa was a college student at the University of British Columbia. And she just again expressed her burning desire to just see the coastline. And for the first time in Elisa's life, her parents were actually supportive of this idea. Elisa was absolutely ecstatic over the fact that she had her parents' support. But there was one catch. Her parents made her promise to phone them every single night, religiously, on her trip so that they knew she was safe along her travels. And Elisa agreed. So in January of 2013, Elisa would post to Tumblr that she was flying from Vancouver to San Diego. From San Diego, she would travel to Los Angeles. From Los Angeles, she would go to Santa Cruz. And from Santa Cruz, she would go to San Francisco, being her last trip, and then return home. And she titled this trip as her West Coast tour. So on January 22nd, 2013, Elisa boarded a plane from Vancouver, British Columbia, and flew to San Diego. Once in San Diego, she would spend the next couple days just doing touristy things along the coastline, and then she took an Amtrak train from San Diego to Los Angeles. And on January 26, 2013, Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel, now known as the Stay on Main. Now, if you've seen my last video, you know that this hotel has a really bad reputation and it's in a really sketchy area. It's literally right on Skid Row, which is known for its ridiculously high crime rates. And this is where I kind of personally just scratch my head. Like, if you're traveling alone, you're going to research the places you're staying beforehand. And Elisa was a quite educated individual. She would know that this hotel, even though it's like a budget hotel, there are plenty of other budget hotels in Los Angeles. I'm just curious as to what really made her choose the Cecil. I wish I knew that. I wish I could find that, but I can't. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and just assume she had absolutely no idea about the history and location of this hotel. So the room that Elisa checked into was a hostel type room, so that means she actually had roommates in the room that she was staying in. Now, it would come out later on in the investigation that the roommates that were staying in the room with Elisa would actually complain to the hotel staff about Elisa's, quote, odd behavior, end quote, which ultimately made the hotel staff move Elisa out of that room into a private room in hopes of not upsetting any more guests. What type of odd behavior specifically? I personally couldn't find any information on. Any article that I read where the roommates had stated this, it always just said, quote, odd behavior, end quote. So do with that what you will. So throughout her trip so far, Elisa had kept her promise to her parents and had faithfully called them every single night. But on January 31st, 2013, the day Elisa was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel, her parents did not receive a phone call. After speaking to the Los Angeles Police Department, the police agreed that this is completely out of character for Elisa, and a full investigation was launched into her disappearance. Sarah, David, and Nina instantly flew from Vancouver to LA to help assist in the investigation in any way that they could. During the early stages of the investigation, it was learned that Elisa had actually visited a bookshop just down the street from the Cecil Hotel on the day of her disappearance. The name of this bookstore was, ironically, The Last Bookstore, and the owner of the store had seen Elisa enter the store and buy almost like souvenirs for her family. Then, on February 6, 2013, 7 days after Elisa Lam was declared missing, the police, with Elisa Lam's family, held a press conference for the public. The Lams declined to comment at this time. Then, on February 13th, 2013, the police released the CCTV footage from the Cecil Hotel in hopes that someone would recognize Elisa Lam. The police were very certain that Elisa was still within the hotel at this time because they covered every single entrance and exit of the hotel and they never found footage of Elisa ever leaving the hotel. Only a few short hours after the police released this footage, it went viral. Elisa's behavior in the elevator is absolutely the most bizarre footage I think I've ever seen of CCTV footage, hands down. And it brought up a lot of theories in regards to Elisa Lam's case. In the footage, Elisa can be seen entering the elevator where she proceeds to meticulously choose a floor. She then stands in the back corner of the elevator waiting for the elevator door to shut, but it doesn't. Elisa then cautiously walks to the opening of the elevator and abruptly peers up and down the hallway before returning back into the elevator where she appears to almost be hiding from someone or something outside the elevator. While hiding in the upper corner of the elevator by the control panel, she once again waits for the elevator door to close, but it doesn't. So once again, Elisa cautiously approaches the opening to the elevator. She stands there for a moment, and it's almost as if she has some built-up courage as she jumps out of the elevator into the hallway. After standing in the hallway for about 15 seconds, the elevator door still hasn't shut, so Elisa proceeds to come back into the elevator, where she decides to push every single button on the control panel. My assumption is that she was trying to get this elevator to start to move. But then, after pushing every single button on the control panel, she steps back outside the elevator. This time, however, Elisa is in the hallway, and she starts motioning these absolutely bizarre hand gestures, making it appear as if she is suffering from some form of a hallucination. A few moments after her bizarre hand gestures in the hallway, Elisa steps down the hallway out of frame of the camera. The elevator door shuts, and sadly, this was the last moments of Elisa Lam's life. Then on February 19th, 2013, guests at the Cecil Hotel started to complain to the hotel staff of the water's taste, color, and pressure. Maintenance worker Santiago Lopez decided to investigate all of these complaints and headed to the roof, as that's where the hotel's water towers were. When he was checking inside the water towers to figure out the cause of this problem, sadly he discovered Elisa Lam's body. She was fully nude and her clothes were floating next to her body. According to a statement by the chief of the fire department of Los Angeles, in order to retrieve Elisa's body, they had to fully drain the water tank and then cut a hole in the side of the tank to retrieve her. The Lams agreed to do a full autopsy, and very quickly an autopsy was performed. In the autopsy report, it would state that there was no evidence of internal or external traumatic injury, and that the cause of death was deemed an accidental drowning. Elisa's toxicology report would state that it, quote, did not find any drug or alcohol intoxication, end quote. However, the report also went on to say that she had a, quote, history of bipolar disorder for which she was prescribed medication. Toxicology studies were performed for the presence of these drugs. However, quantitation was not performed due to limited sample availability, end quote. So in other words, they tested to see how much or how little of her prescription medication was in her bloodstream at her time of death. But unfortunately, due to the sample size that they had retrieved, they were unable to measure it appropriately. It was declared officially to the public that Elisa Lam's cause of death was an accidental drowning, most likely associated from a manic episode related to her bipolar disorder. But the public wasn't buying it. Several theories emerged in regards to what actually happened to Elisa Lam following her final moments off the elevator to her being found in a water tower. I'm personally going to be discussing 4 of them. There is a lot and I'd be here for a long time, but I'm going to be discussing the 4 main theories that have emerged from this case. The first theory I'm going to talk about is that her death was not an accidental drowning and that this was actually a covered-up homicide from one of the hotel staff. A supportive argument to this theory is that there's only 2 doors that you can access the roof from. One door is a fire escape, and if you push it open, it triggers an entire alarm throughout the Cecil Hotel. And the second door is a staff-only access door. You need a key card to open the door. So how exactly did Elisa Lam get onto the roof and into a water tank without anybody seeing or hearing her? To add suspicion to this theory, it was stated that it would be extremely difficult for Elisa to climb on top of the water tank, let alone open the 20-pound lid by herself, as she was quite a petite person, and then to climb inside as the opening is extremely narrow. Also, to add to this theory, it was stated originally that when Santiago found Elisa's body in the water tank, that the lid was closed. But when the public started asking the police, how come it took you guys this long to find her body? Like, you have to keep in mind they had a large police presence at the Cecil Hotel, as they firmly believed she was still in the hotel, and they ripped that hotel apart, including the roof. So the public was like, why did it take you guys so long? And when they were pressed with these questions, Santiago would actually say, you know what, the hatch wasn't closed when I found Elisa. It was actually open, and I had closed it before the police arrived. Although it's a minor detail, if the hatch was open and the police are on the roof looking for Elisa Lam, an open hatch on a water tank would raise some suspicion, would it not? I don't know. A lot of people point the finger at Santiago as he was the first one to find her. He has access to the roof and the water tanks. And why would you lie about the water tank? How can you miss that information? Why is that changed? Sus. Just a little bit, right? The second theory I'm going to be talking about is that of a copycat killer, which honestly, I hadn't heard this theory before I started investigating Elisa Lam's case. And this one kind of blew my mind a bit. So there's a Japanese film called Dark Water, and it was released in 2002, so quite a while before Elisa Lam's disappearance and death. However, it was remade into an American film in 2015. The American film stars Jennifer Connelly and John C. Reilly, and many people have pointed out similarities between Elisa Lam's case and this film, Dark Water. So the storyline of the film focuses on a mother and daughter, and they're living in an apartment, and all of a sudden dark water starts raining into their apartment from the apartment above. When they go to investigate where this water is coming from, they realize that the apartment above them has completely flooded, and the family that used to live there is mysteriously gone. Fast forward to the end of the movie, and the mother actually finds the body of the little girl that lived in the apartment above them, you guessed it, in the water tank of the apartment complex. Other similarities that people have pointed out is that the clothing Elisa Lam was wearing on the CCTV footage is eerily similar to the main character of Dark Water. And the last similarity that has been pointed out is the elevator in Dark Water malfunctions, similar to Elisa Lam's elevator malfunction. And they also use the camera in Dark Water in the elevator as a vantage point in part of the movie, also similar to the CCTV footage that was released in Elisa's case. The second last theory I'm going to discuss is the elevator game. If you haven't heard of the elevator game, it's kind of like Bloody Mary, but on steroids. It originated in Korea, and it's a ritual that you perform in an elevator that has very specific rules. It needs to be played in a public building. You can play it by yourself or with others, but if you're playing with others, you need to follow the rules carefully. And it needs to be performed in an elevator in a public building that has more than 10 floors, which the Cecil does. So how you play is you enter the elevator, you press the 4th floor, and once you press the 4th floor, no one can exit the elevator or else you have to start again. After pressing the 4th floor, the elevator door should shut. It'll take you to the 4th floor. When the doors open, you have to push the 2nd floor. Once you get to the 2nd floor and the elevator door is open, again staying on the elevator, you push the 6th floor. There's a very specific sequence that you have to follow. But once you reach the 5th floor, it's said that a woman will then enter into the elevator with you. You are not to look at her, you are not to speak to her, you are not to say anything. Once the woman enters the elevator, you're to push the 1st floor. If the elevator takes you to the 1st floor, you're to get off the elevator and not look back. But if the elevator takes you to the 10th floor, you're to get off the elevator on the 10th floor and not respond to the woman when she asks, "Where are you going?" You are now apparently in the other world. The other world apparently is just like this world, except electronics don't work and there's no light source. This is why some people actually believe in this theory, as they believe that Elisa's bizarre hand gestures when she got off of the elevator was a result of her not being able to see anything as she was stuck in the other world. The last theory I'm going to talk about is Lam Elisa. Yes, you heard that right, Lam Elisa, not Elisa Lam. Around the time Elisa went missing, there was a ridiculous tuberculosis outbreak in and around the Cecil Hotel, specifically Skid Row. The theory began online when people started speculating why Elisa Lam had chosen the Cecil Hotel. Many people believe that Elisa was actually sent to the Cecil Hotel as the university she studied at is well known for its tuberculosis research center. And they believed that Elisa had a very large role in the Tuberculosis Research Center, and she was sent to LA from the university to try out an experimental treatment for tuberculosis that hadn't been FDA approved yet. Many people who believe in this theory believe that this was the cause of Elisa's bizarre hand gestures and almost hallucinogenic type actions in the hallway. They believe that these type of actions was a result of the side effects of the experimental medication Elisa was subjected to, rather than a manic episode as a result of her bipolar. What's even more strange is that the test that was used during the time of her disappearance and for a few years before Elisa's disappearance and death is called Lam Elisa. Literally, Elisa Lam's name backwards, which many conspiracy theorists about this theory believe that this was intentional, because now when you Google Lam Elisa, you're just flooded with entries of Elisa Lam's disappearance and death. So many people believe that this was a governmental cover-up. When the public really started pressing the fact that these are just too many coincidences, the fact that her university is well known for its TB research center, and your TB test is her name backwards, the toxicology report from her autopsy was released to the public stating that she did not have tuberculosis at the time of her death. But the people that believed in this theory didn't care, didn't change their thoughts on the subject at all. They still believed that the medication Elisa had taken cured the tuberculosis that she had, but ultimately caused these life-threatening side effects, resulting in her death. Please understand, I personally couldn't find any documentation on the fact that Elisa was in fact involved in this experimental, non-FDA approved drug trial for tuberculosis. And all the theories that I spoke about today are just theories. Regardless of the what, where, when, why, we still need to recognize the who, that being Elisa Lam, and my deepest condolences go out to the Lam family and anyone affected by her tragic loss. But with that being said, I'm still very curious. This is still a very peculiar case to me. It raises a lot of questions. It should just be a cut and dry case, right? Like, she had a manic episode from her bipolar disorder, which resulted in her having hallucinations and ultimately led her to find her way on top of the roof and accidentally fall into the water tank and accidentally drown, right? So then why are there so many conspiracy theories surrounding her death and this case? So you guys let me know what you think down below in the comments. I still don't know if I have my final verdict in my head. It's a questionable case, that's for sure. So that, my friends, is the very bizarre and peculiar case of Elisa Lam. If you enjoyed today's recording, please leave a like or a comment. It's super rewarding. Wishing you nothing but a beautiful, blissful day. See you all someday. Bye-bye.